office on Park Avenue in Manhattan and meet my bosses. Fantastic, I said. I could see TGIF in the rearview mirror. But I'm warning you, he added, you are the 10th person I'm sending over there. They haven't hired anyone yet. Whatever, I thought. Those guys don't have what I have. I won the Clemo. They don't want it like I want it. I woke up the next morning, put on my best and only pinstripe suit, and rode the Long Island Railroad into the city. I had my resume packed in my black briefcase. My internships were lined up on the page like well-behaved kids, each one announcing what I had accomplished as a dutiful employee. I sat down with a man and woman in a fancy office on Park Avenue, and they started asking me about my experience. I explained how I kept a log of highlights and learned how to cut promos and highlights at Sports Channel. Then one of them stopped me and asked, are all the jobs listed on here internships? Well, yeah, I said. Then they just looked at each other and nodded. That was the end of the interview. I didn't get the job. My dad had dropped me off at the train that morning and wished me good luck. He was on his way to New Jersey for some ice cream sales calls and then headed to the office. If I was done early, he said I should call him. He'd swing through the city and pick me up. You'll meet me in the neighborhood, he said. That's what he called the area where he grew up on the corner of Mott and Hester Streets in Little Italy. He never said we were going to the city on Sundays. We were going to the neighborhood. I liked it down there, right on the border of Chinatown. Turn one way and you'd walk into a street lined with Italian restaurants with cannoli displayed in the front window. Turn the other way and you were face to face with roasted ducks hanging from hooks. The two parts of town were so intertwined, Dad's buddies had nicknamed him Sally Foo because it sounded Chinese. Even my mom called him that. After my mom and Dad were first married and living with her parents, someone came to the door and asked for Sal Dell'Abate. My grandfather had no idea who that was. He thought his son-in-law's name was Sally Foo. Whenever we visited the neighborhood, we stopped by a place on Hester called Moe's, a hole in the wall that wasn't open to the public. It was a social club, one that wasn't all that friendly if you didn't belong. Inside, you'd find a bunch of old Italian guys drinking with one jukebox in the corner. It actually always freaked me out whenever we stopped by there. The old-timers sort of smirked when they saw me, then patted me on the head and slipped me money or Hershey bars. Once I told my dad I had to go to the bathroom, and he pointed to a long hallway and said the door was on the right. But I was a little scared, and by the time I got to the end of the hallway, I couldn't remember if it was left or right, so I picked the door on the left. When I opened it, I saw a bunch of guys sitting around a table with stacks and stacks of money on it. One of them screamed at me, "Shut the fucking door, kid!" What? No candy? Clearly something weird was going on here. As I got older and realized this, I asked my dad, how come he never joined the mafia? He was a gambler. He was tough and he lived in the right neighborhood. He told me he always had chances, but it just wasn't the way he wanted to go. Not that he didn't know people who did. He and my mom used to talk about this one guy he grew up with who had a cockeyed look about him. He scared her. In fact, they thought it was the look that may have gotten him killed. Once after my dad had lost his job, we were at one of the big flea markets in Oakdale, Long Island, where he was selling crap to make ends meet. This was out in the middle of nowhere, a real rural area. We were sitting together, and it was pretty busy, but my dad suddenly stopped talking and just stared at someone, an older guy who was walking around the racks of clothes. Wherever the guy went, my dad's eyes tracked him, until he had to get up and follow him to keep him in his sights. When my dad confronted him, the guy turned white and quickly walked away. "Who was that?" I asked my dad when he came back. "I thought it was a guy from the neighborhood," my dad said, "but he said I had the wrong fella." A couple of years later, my dad showed me the guy's picture in the paper. He'd been killed. The mob had been looking for him for years. After I was rejected by the NBA, I went down to the neighborhood, found a payphone, and called my dad. He told me to meet him at Moe's. I walked into the bar looking like some kind of FBI agent. I was carrying my black leather briefcase and had on my gray pinstripe suit, a starched white shirt, and a tie. As I walked through the door, a bartender dropped his rag and jumped over the bar. He stood in front of me and he said, "This is a private club." Before I could say anything, he was pushing me. "What are you doing here?" "I'm here to meet my dad," I screamed. "Sal Dell'Abate." "Never heard of him, never heard of him," the guy yelled back, pushing me harder. "Sal Dell'Abate, Sal Dell'Abate. He used to live on Mott Street. He comes here all the time." "I don't know him," the guy answered back. I really thought the guy was going to kill me. He was angry and pushing hard. As I was about to fall ass backward onto Hester Street, I yelled, "Sally Foo!" "Hold it!" a voice in the dark yelled out. "What did you say?" "Sally Foo," I answered. "That's my dad." Then he looked at me and he said, "You Sally Foo's kid?" "Yeah," I said. Then he looked at the bartender and said, "He's okay," and bought me a club soda. I sat at a table by myself, sweating through my suit, until my dad finally showed up. He laughed at that story all the way back to Long Island.
greatest bad storytelling songs of the 70s.
Earlier in the book, I talked about how I used to listen to AM radio in the early 70s, and I would listen to Casey Kasem all the time, and there were songs that, you had to listen to the whole song. They told a story. There was the verse and the chorus and whatever, but you had to get to the end of the song to hear how it all turned out. These aren't great songs. These are just sort of the greatest bad storytelling songs that I can remember. So, in no particular order, The Night the Lights Went Out in Georgia by Vicki Lawrence, Billy, Don't Be a Hero by Bo Donaldson and the Haywoods, Gypsies, Tramps, and Thieves by Cher. Oh, this song's so bad it'll kill you. Seasons in the Sun by Terry Jacks. I Shot the Sheriff by Eric Clapton. Actually, that's a good song. Angie by Helen Reddy. Brandy, You're a Fine Girl by Looking Glass. Me and Mrs. Jones, We Got a Thing Going On by Billy Paul. Patches by Clarence Carter. Ooh, I love this one. Ride, Captain Ride by Blues Image. Oh, this song is as bad as it gets. Run, Joey, Run by David Geddes. Daddy, Don't You Walk So Fast by Wayne Newton. Oh, this song feels like it goes on forever. The Wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald by Gordon Lightfoot. Of course, there's a classic Bad Bad Leroy Brown, and who could forget the tearjerker Cats in the Cradle by Harry Chapin.
Chapter 16. The Birthday Pact.
For a couple of months following the NBA fiasco, I fell headlong into the TGIF abyss. I was partying nonstop, letting that one free beer and a plate of half-price skins turn into full-on benders. It got so bad that one night one of the bartenders yelled at me for treating the job in the restaurant with such casual disregard. I know a lot of you are using this to get through college or as a job till you get the one you really want, he said. But for some of us, this is our livelihood. I felt like an ass. Finally, around Christmas, I got a real job in radio. Kind of. I took a once-a-week midnight to 8 a.m. shift at an all-automated station called WCTO that played an easy-listening format. I did this on one of my off nights from Fridays. WCTO played elevator music. Every fifth song had vocals. In the radio business, the demographic for this format is called 65 to Dead. It turned out to be the worst job I ever had, including cleaning the grease traps at my cousin's pork store. I would start my shift by going to the deli across from the station, which was in Farmingdale, about 25 minutes from my house, and buying anything that would keep me up all night. Iced tea, cupcakes, Hershey bars. I'd have a snack and drink whenever I felt myself nodding off, which happened often. Because the station was automated, it had no DJs. The music, the teases, the commercials, all of it ran on reels and tapes.